Good morning and welcome to our webinar on lump sum funding in Horizon Europe. My name is Ulrich GENSCHEL. I'm a head of sector in the European Commission, working on the simplification of the processes in Horizon Europe. And together with my colleague Andreia CHICOS, I have the pleasure to take you through today's webinar. Before we begin in earnest, let me take you through the agenda. I'm going to start giving a presentation with the main principles and specific details on how lump sum funding is working. Then we are having three guests with already ample experience in doing lump sum projects, and we're going to hear how that has been working for them so far. Then we're going to have a short break in which we encourage you to post your questions in Slido and upvote other questions that interest you as well. And that is then followed by a Q&A session where we will go through these questions with the most popular question at the top. So I encourage you really to wait maybe until you have heard the presentation and the contributions from our guests, and then see which questions really remain and which have already been answered perhaps in the first half of this webinar. So let's get started. One key principle of lump sum funding I should start with before going into the reasons is we are going to cover in this presentation really the specificities of lump sum funding, not every detail of the life cycle of Horizon Europe projects, because mostly this is exactly the same in lump sum funding as in any other grant that we have in Horizon Europe. And this is a theme you're going to hear again and again in this presentation. So for a very large part, what we're doing in lump sum funding is the same as generally speaking in Horizon Europe. And here are the specificities. So why do we use lump sum funding in the first place? Well, there are three main reasons in no particular order. There has been very large agreement across the stakeholders and the European institutions that the financial error rate is too high, and alas, we have not been able to simplify the actual cost funding to a degree that would really deal with this problem. Actual cost funding remains relatively complex. So here we see lump sums as the measure to take away the financial reporting and eradicate the source of error. That also comes with a major potential for simplification, because without any financial management and real cost reporting, which is a really complex part of the normal management of Horizon Europe actual cost projects, you really save a lot of work, and in particular you save a lot of knowledge and experience that is no longer needed in the execution of lump sum projects. And then lastly, we also hope, of course, to be focusing much more on content, and that comes in a way by design, because lump sum projects are paid and reimbursed against the completion of work packages. So everybody, you, the project participants, as well as on our side, the project officers who monitor and follow up on these projects, will automatically focus much more on what's going on in these projects and to what degree they have been completed. With that, let's go. We show you one more piece of information, again motivating us to go for the lump sums. It shows you that really the vast majority of our unique beneficiaries just have one grant in the framework program. Now, these are data from Horizon 2020, but the picture in Horizon Europe is no different. The vast majority of unique beneficiaries just have one grant or maybe two grants, and very few large organizations have 100 grants or more. So it's only those very large organizations that have professional departments support and the experience from many years, and indeed they have typically little problem with dealing with the actual cost grants. However, we have to have a system that works for everybody in the program, including for the newcomers and those that only have a single grant. So we have to have a system that works the first time you are using it without the help of specialized staff or the experience from many years. This is where lump sum funding, we believe, is the solution. So we have two major lump sum options in place in Horizon Europe. Type 1 is where we fix the lump sum up front. We don't use this very often. In fact, I think there's just two types of topics currently using that system. That is the ERC proof of concept topic or call, and then there is the EIC Advanced Innovation Challenges in the phase 1. These are relatively small grants. We have predefined the amount of funding. It cannot be changed. You can only apply for this specific amount that is set in the work program. You cannot change it or apply for something else. If you are successful, you will get exactly that amount. In type 2, that is a much more versatile type. You define the lump sum in the proposal. And this is what this webinar is mostly about, because this is what we use for the bulk of lump sum topics in the work program. Essentially, it's very, very similar to our standard grants, because you define your own budget. We check it, we agree it, and once it's signed, we are not questioning that budget afterwards. So how does that work? First, when you write your lump sum proposal, all of the main documentation is the same. You use the standard application form. It's the same way of presenting your objectives and the methodology, and it's the same level of detail that is needed to describe the activities covered in each work package. Needless to say, this sort of detail that you provide there needs to be enough to be able to evaluate the proposal and also to monitor the project in case it's funded. Now, what's different is that on top of this basic proposal, of the main proposal, you're also required to submit a detailed budget table. And this detailed budget table breaks down the cost, the estimated cost of your project in much more detail than is the case in a standard actual cost proposal. This is needed for us to examine the cost that you propose, and if we agree, that becomes the lump sum. This table has currently two possible formats: either our traditional Excel table, where you actually enter all these details in an Excel table provided in the submission system, or it's already integrated in Part A. In other words, it's an online web form that you complete as part of completing the administrative forms of your proposal. This is a new IT development which is currently being introduced and rolled out, but in 2026 we still have both types of topics, so watch out. Your lump sum topic may be one that is using the Excel sheet, the Excel tool, or it's one that is using the Part A online form, but it will never be both. So you will never be asked to submit and complete this budget twice. It's Excel or it's online, a web form, not both. And if it's the Excel, make absolutely sure you're using the one form that is submitted, that is provided to you in the online system. Do not use any other version that might be circulating or might be floating around elsewhere from a different topic or from a previous topic. Only the one provided to you in the topic you're applying to. So, what's new in work program 26-27 is that we have introduced indeed this online form in Part A I just mentioned. So there has been a rollout, there has been a start in Cluster 5. There is still some IT developments ongoing, and I just mentioned this is going to be used more and more, and eventually it's going to replace the Excel file completely. Again, the point, you will never be expected to complete both the Excel file and the Part A form. It is one or the other. And then we have a simplified proposal template. Generally, for all of Horizon Europe, it's not lump sum specific, but also to be mentioned here. We do no longer ask for certain tables that justify costs in Part B. Is a series of tables in section 3.1 of Part B of your proposal. That's already very detailed now, very specific, but okay, certain tables, to summarize, have been removed with the idea that this information is not specifically needed at evaluation stage. However, in lump sums, these costs, if you have them, in particular in-kind contributions and the justifications for Yeah, I think other cost categories, this still needs to be part of your Excel file or needs to be justified in the comments tab of your online form. This is just a screenshot to show you what this online form looks like. Effectively, it recapitulates the Excel form. So I'm not going to spend more time on that screenshot. When you write your proposal, as I said, the main thing that's different, that's new, is this additional budget detail in the web form or in the Excel. What we expect here is that you provide the best cost estimations for each cost category, and you need to resolve it by beneficiary and by work package. So it's specifically that higher resolution that is new in lump sums. We want your cost estimations resolved by beneficiary and by work package. And the aim in the end is to have a price, if you like, for each work package that we have agreed and a lump sum share for each beneficiary that's part of this work package. And as I said, it's the best estimation of the cost at the time of writing the proposal. We are not expecting accuracy in the sense that you can be accurate if you report costs after they have been incurred, after the project has taken place. So that's a different concept. We want your best estimations. All these costs that you include, we can simplify saying it's every cost that would be eligible in an actual cost grant, in a standard Horizon Europe grant, is also eligible, can also be included in your lump sum budget upfront. The rules that govern which type of costs are eligible, are possible, are exactly the same. The difference is just in lump sums, you estimate these costs upfront. In actual cost grants, you report these costs after they have incurred. But which costs may be covered by the grant is exactly the same. No less, no more, it's the same. And obviously, what we would like you to see is that we want these costs to be in line with the work proposed. So the amounts given to each beneficiary, the amounts given to each work package, and then of course also to the various cost categories, your personnel costs, costs for equipment, other purchase costs, subcontracting costs, all of this needs to be corresponding and needs to be justified by the work that you are proposing, by the proposal that you are proposing. And you have comment fields either in the Excel or in the online form to explain and justify these costs. Make use of these possibility to justify and explain in the comments, in particular in case you have very high personnel costs and in case you have costs that may not be self-explanatory or that may not be clear from just reading your proposal to the experts. Ultimately, your aim is to present a budget that gives the resolution for each work package and each beneficiary, is in line with the proposed work, is reasonable, and convinces the expert that this is indeed the budget needed in the distribution across beneficiaries and work packages appropriate to carry out your project. And the measuring stick that we always apply is that this must be reasonable. We are not after accuracy to a euro, we are after reasonableness here. Of course, the details, there's more guidance and more details both in the Excel form and in the online help for filling in this budget. Another point to consider when writing your lump sum proposal is the work packages and the number of work packages. So over the years, there has maybe been also some developments here and some myths. So to be clear, you may split work packages and you may use a higher number of work packages in lump sum grants than in other projects. But this is not an obligation. This is entirely up to you to decide if you really need to split work packages in order to optimize the cash flow. How is that? Well, we can only pay the work for each work package in a lump sum grant after it has been completed. So if you have work packages which span 2 or more reporting periods, the work in these work packages will only be reimbursed at the very end of the work package, meaning you can't have any reimbursement for it at the end of the first reporting period. If you believe this is paramount and necessary for your project, then what you can do is you split the work package along the lines of the reporting periods. So I have a graph illustrating this. So imagine you have a single long duration work package spanning the entire project, for example, project management. Traditionally, this can be one work package spanning the entire period of the project. Now, in an actual cost grant, you could claim costs out of this management work package at the end of each reporting period 1, 2, and 3. Not so in a lump sum grant. If you have the situation shown here at the top, in a lump sum grant, you would only be reimbursed for the management work at the very end after year 4. Now, you get the possibility to split this work package in 3 work packages, 1 for each of the reporting periods. In this way, you would, of course, now be able to be reimbursed for each of these work packages at the end of each reporting period. So what you have done is effectively creating 3 work packages for management. You don't actually have to repeat the description each time, because you can, in the second and the third instance of this work package, just refer to the first and say this is the same thing, like you would have done had this been a single work package for the whole project. You would also only have had 1 description. Now you keep this 1 description in the first work package and refer to it in the second and the third. So it's not really making your proposal a lot longer, but it gives you the opportunity to be reimbursed. I would like to emphasize again, this is possible, this is not an obligation, especially when you have a high amount of pre-financing in your grant. Many of our projects get at least 50%, and many also get 80% of the total maximum amount as a pre-financing upfront before the project begins. And in a situation like that, optimizing the cash flow like this is likely not necessary. Also, in view of the fact that we have a payment limit in our projects, in all our projects, which is 90%. So you will, in any case, never get more than 90% of the grant before the very end when you have a final payment. So take this into account. Use splitting of work packages where needed, also for technical work packages, but make sure that the work package structure that comes out of that is still sensible. Each work package still makes sense as a work package. You should not give the impression that you have, let's say, atomized your work package structure and created a gigantic number of work packages that are becoming sort of collections of single tasks. They should really still be work packages in the sense that they are major parts, major subdivisions of the project. When your lump sum proposal is evaluated, again, we use the standard process. Experts will apply the standard evaluation criteria: excellence, impact, and implementation. And the cost estimations is now something that is, of course, evaluated in addition. That is something that doesn't happen in this way in an actual cost grant, and this happens under the implementation criterion. I already mentioned what we ask our experts to vet is that your cost estimations are reasonable and non-excessive. That really is the key word here, not a check according to the level of the last euro, but the whole package needs to make sense. And of course, not only whether the total is reasonable and excessive and non-excessive, but also if the distribution across beneficiaries and work packages is actually in line with the activities that you laid out in your proposal. So if experts detect that they find some of your estimations are unconvincing, not justified, or not in line with the activities you proposed, then we ask them to give us concrete recommendations on how this should be solved. That can be simple rearrangements of the budget, so to shift budget from a work package to another, or from one beneficiary to another. Or, of course, it can also be to reduce one or other cost estimation that has been found to be overestimated. Now, if that happens, I can assure you that does not limit or decrease the chances of your proposal to be funded. We have a very strict principle that such corrections of the budget are part, if you like, of the negotiation. Again, this is something that doesn't happen in other grants, but here we can modify your budget it's not as such seen as a shortcoming that leads to a lower score and therefore diminishes the chance of your proposal to be funded. It's just a correction of the budget necessary in the process to agree the lump sum. So don't worry, we can make these changes. We are not penalizing your project, your proposal for it. It can absolutely go through with these changes and have equal chances to be funded compared to proposals where no such changes are needed. One main source of information that the experts are using when looking at your cost estimations is the Horizon dashboard for lump sum evaluation. What we put there is historical data based on the personnel costs that have been funded so far in Horizon Europe. It's typically using the last 2 or 3 years of data from the grants where we provide the distribution of costs per person month, and that can be resolved for each country and for each organization type. So what you see here in the graph is a comparison of personnel costs for research organizations in Romania at the top and in Germany at the bottom. This already shows you personnel costs across Europe and beyond are very, very different. This is also why we provide this resource to experts, because probably none or very few of our technical experts have all this information. What are typical costs in universities, in research organizations, in private companies participating in Horizon Europe, and what personnel costs have been funded so far for these kind of organizations in Horizon Europe. So this is an indicative information against which we will hold your proposed and requested personnel costs. Generally speaking, if you are below the 80th percentile, that means if your cost rates are below what 80% of the funded person months so far have costs, we will typically accept that. And if they're above 80%, above the 80th percentile, we would expect you to specifically justify that and tell us why that is so. For example, this could be because you have a particular need for very highly qualified staff, or because there were recent main increases in salaries. There may very well be good reasons for that. But in case you're part of this, if you like, top 20 percentile group of most expensive personnel costs in your peer group, and your peer group here means your type of organization and your country. So we are only comparing, if you like, universities from one country with other universities from that same country and not with other countries, knowing that the personnel costs in different countries and different types of organizations can be so very different. This is what this resource is there for. It is, of course, public. You have the link here. It may be a very good idea for you to have a look at it when you build the budget of your proposal, to be aware and to be sure to include a good justification in case you need higher costs than are depicted in these distributions for your country and your organization. When it comes to grant preparation, again, we follow standard procedures. Of course, now we will use the model grant agreement for lump sums. That is a slightly different model grant agreement compared with the standard model grant agreement. Maybe it's important to point out that this lump sum version of the model grant agreement has no new obligations that do not exist in the actual cost grant agreement. However, there are many obligations, namely all the financial management obligations from the standard model grant agreement, that do not exist any longer in the lump sum version. So we can really say, legally speaking, this model grant agreement is simpler. Of course, all the non-financial obligations are all the same. They are identical to what you would see in a standard lump sum in a standard grant agreement. Generally speaking, this no negotiation principle that we have for Horizon Europe applies also to lump sums, with the exception that indeed we can, as I mentioned before, modify the budget. This can happen as a result of the recommendations that we got from the experts, but of course also in case there are legal changes, if a beneficiary changes its status, if a beneficiary is leaving or added during grant preparation, or if other information becomes available during grant preparation, or if indeed the beneficiaries provide new information, that can all lead to a new assessment of the budget which will then finally come to a conclusion by the time that the grant agreement is signed. So we have, if you like, we do due diligence for assessing and justifying the lump sum during evaluation, during grant preparation, but finally when we sign the grant, we will not have these details anymore on file. They will not become part of the grant agreement, and this amount will not be questioned afterwards. For example, if the prices change. An example would be if you have included a piece of equipment in your lump sum budget and the price for that equipment goes up or it goes down, we will not change the lump sum afterwards. Of course, always with the one small caveat in case there was really a misrepresentation, if there was fraud. This is a different story. But if indeed it was a reasonable estimate, definitely we will not come back and question the lump sum afterwards. So I already mentioned what we put in the grant agreement afterwards is only the total lump sum and its breakdown into lump sum shares across partners and work packages. All the details that you have provided in this Excel file are not part of the grant agreement anymore. We deem that at this point the budget has been fixed, agreed and signed, and we are not coming back and questioning this afterwards. And this is what this breakdown looks like. So this is very much a schematic of your Annex 2. That's the financial annex of a lump sum grant agreement. You have the amounts for each work package here in the bottom row. And you have the total amounts for each beneficiary in the last column. So here you have 4 beneficiaries and 8 work packages. The total lump sum here is 3 million. And the lump sum is really what we would also call the maximum grant amount in legal terms. And all the figures in this table is then the individual shares for beneficiaries in each work package. So at the top right corner, these 250,000 euro, that is the lump sum share of beneficiary 1 in work package 1. And the 350,000 euro at the bottom of column 1, that is the amount that we pay when work package 1 is completed. But I have to say that you can absolutely use the lump sum in any way you like. You are not actually bound to using it according to this schedule. As long as you complete your project, as long as you complete the activities in each of these work packages, you are going to be paid this amount. And we are not even aware because you're not reporting on how this amount is spent. So that is a very far-reaching amount, a very far-reaching budget flexibility. However, if you want to change that Annex 2 in the grant agreement, and that I think goes without saying, each time that you want to change something that is fixed, that is written in the grant agreement, you need an amendment. The grant agreement itself can, of course, only be changed if we do an amendment. We'll see that's possible, just like in any other grant, but we don't oblige you to do that. It's a possibility that you have in case you want to align the reality of the project to or rather the other way around, if you want to align the Annex 2 to the reality of the project. But that is mainly a decision that you take. It's not an obligation that comes from our side. So here indeed we show all the types of amendment are still possible. There is no amendment that is not anymore possible in a lump sum grant. The main principle perhaps that's different is any work package that has already been paid, that has been completed, accepted and paid, is considered a completed part of the project and it cannot be amended anymore. So it's in lump sums we are really considering that work package by work package. As soon as you have declared it complete, it's accepted and paid. We are not going back to that. That's a done deal, and you can only amend all the remaining work packages that are ongoing or haven't been started yet. And now in Horizon Europe, I don't think we have many Horizon 2020 grants left going. We still had a slightly more involved process for amendments, but now in Horizon Europe, the process for doing an amendment is exactly the same in lump sums as in any other grants. Maybe indeed here I still see this queue on the bottom of this slide. In apart from doing an amendment, which is the formal procedure and changes your grant agreement, you can also report a deviation in your technical report. So your technical report has a section called deviations from the work plan. And if you indicate and justify why something has been done in a different way compared to the description in your grant agreement, that is assessed as part of the review of your technical report. And if that technical report is accepted, that change is accepted. So that has the same legal value as something that you put in an amendment, and is a simplified procedure in that sense, because you avoid the amendment. So if you have, for example, smaller changes in the work plan, maybe in many cases this would be perfectly enough to just explain what went differently compared to the initial planning in your technical report, have it evaluated and justified and accepted as part of monitoring of the project, and you can go ahead with this change as well. Payments are, again, the schedule is exactly the same. You have a pre-financing payment at the beginning of the project. The rules for calculating the pre-financing are exactly the same, meaning that in projects with 1 or 2 reporting periods, you have 80% pre-financing, 80% of the maximum grant amount. If you have 3 reporting periods, this will be 53%. If you have 4 reporting periods, it'll be 40%, and I think there are very few projects with 5 or more reporting periods. These are, and the bottom line is, these percentages of the maximum grant amount in the pre-financing are exactly the same. So sometimes people wonder if there's a pre-financing at all in lump sum grants, and yes, absolutely they are, and they are identical to the pre-financing you get in any other standard grant in Horizon Europe. Then we do a payment after each reporting period. That is the so-called interim payments, where we pay the predefined lump sum shares for each of the work packages that you have completed and that we have agreed are complete. And then at the final payment, at the end of the project, we will pay, of course, also all the work packages that are declared complete at this point in time, but we have the additional possibility to also pay partially. We don't do this partial payments at intermediate payments, because at intermediate payments we always want to give you the possibility to still complete that partially completed work package. So we don't accept partially completed work packages before the end of the project, but at the very end of the project you can declare something partially complete, and then typically that would also be accepted as partially complete according to your explanations, of course. And like for any other grant, we would then also release the amount that was retained for the mutual insurance mechanism. No difference to standard procedure. So to look at reporting and payment in a bit more detail, how does this work? Basically, you have exactly the same reporting templates again. So we come back to my favorite theme. We use the same templates essentially everywhere. As for standard Horizon grants, standard reporting template as well. The only difference is that in this standard reporting template, the section that is about reporting on the use of resources do not apply, because you don't have to report neither financial aspects nor the use of resources in lump sum grants. The only thing that you really focus on is the technical execution of the project and the activities that have been completed. So in each of your technical reports, at the end of each reporting period, the consortium declares which of the work packages have been completed or not completed. And of course, your technical report should explain why. I mean, obviously, the technical details need to be there for the project officer to understand and be able to agree and accept that work packages have been completed. Now, once that is agreed, these work packages will be paid. So you can, as I already mentioned, have in intermediate payment stages only have completed and not completed, but at the end you can have also partially completed. So it's effectively a simple choice on a pull-down menu: completed, not completed, or at the end partially completed. And in that case, you can also enter the percentage in a yes, in an additional field that will then be available for you to enter the percentage that you consider has been completed. Key principle here is that the degree of completion does not depend on your success or on meeting the objectives of your proposal, of your grant, but rather that you have done the work as agreed. One typical example I like to use here is if your project was about carrying out a clinical study, we certainly want to see that you have done the various stages of this clinical study. But in case it turns out that in case the result of that clinical study is negative and it shows that the intervention you tested is not useful, not efficient, and will never see the light of the day or the clinic, that will certainly not interfere with us reimbursing the work. What we want to see is that the work has been done for this clinical study, but we are not making the payment dependent in any way on the success and on the outcome of that clinical study. And the same principle applies to all of our projects. We want to see the activities completed. We want to see that you made the necessary effort, but we are not making payment dependent on these efforts having met with success. And this schematic here shows you then how the payment is done. This is really the beauty, if you like, of the lump sum system, because you effectively have no financial report anymore. Well, we say here it's much simplified, but effectively the financial report is completely automated. It still exists. It's automatically generated based on your input on which work packages have been completed, because our IT system can then read from this financial schedule in the annex of the grant agreement the amount of funding that was associated with each of these work packages, and of course also the lump sum shares that were associated with each partner in these work packages. And from that, a payment can be automatically calculated. And then if your declaration of the work packages is accepted, it can automatically be executed. So you see here in a scheme like this, where you have declared work package 1 complete, because all beneficiaries have completed their work. You get 350,000 for that. In work package 2, that's an ongoing work package. Only some of the work has been done, but not all. We are not reimbursing this, not half, not full. We're simply waiting for work package 2. Work package 3 at this point can be reimbursed. It's complete. 4 cannot be reimbursed, and 5 even hasn't been started. So in this case, we calculate a payment of 700,000 euro, and the financial statement for that is automatically generated based on your statement, and that's it. What we have also maybe simplified one step further in Horizon Europe compared to Horizon 2020 is that only the coordinator is involved in this, declaring the work packages and signing the financial statement, because the financial statement is a direct outcome of your technical report and declaring work packages complete or incomplete. There is no other intervention and no other piece of information used apart from which work packages are complete and to which extent. All the rest is automated. So we also let only the coordinator sign that document, and nobody else in the consortium needs to come in on that. Of course, in lump sum funding, as I said, we pay against completed work packages, and that makes how we accept work packages an important question. So what are the criteria that we apply? Generally, of course, we accept them when the activities have been carried out in a satisfactory way. But we can also accept them when all the essential tasks have been completed. In other words, we don't overdo this in terms of that every last small task has to be done in exactly the way that has been put in the grant agreement. We realize that deviations are very often necessary, and we accept if you have done the project in slightly different ways, as long as it's clear that you have essentially carried out all the tasks, or you have carried out equivalent tasks. And when indeed these deviations, your deviations, have been explained and justified. So you can, in case your deviations are bigger than just small deviations, in that case, use the option to make amendments, to amend your grant, to align your work packages to the new situation, the new scientific reality in your field, to be able to really show afterwards that you have completed these work packages. And you should probably not wait with that until the very end of the project. But if you really see it'll be very difficult to do the project in the way that it was initially conceived and major changes are necessary, then it certainly is in your interest to talk to your project officer to amend the project in a way that allows you to carry it out in the way that then becomes the latest version of the grant agreement following an amendment. If we consider that one of your work packages has not been complete, we will always give you the possibility to come in and tell us why you believe that was in fact the case. So there is a kind of a contradictory procedure whenever we reject part or all of your work package, in which case you get the opportunity to explain why you believe, in fact, why it was complete. And then only after that will the project officer take a final decision. And I mentioned already, if this is at an intermediate stage, you will then always have the possibility to complete this work package later during the project and have the opportunity to resubmit it at a later stage. So if your work package is rejected, you will definitely have until the end of the project to submit a version that can be reimbursed in full or at least in part. At intermediate stage, therefore, we only pay the accepted full work packages, and at the end, we will pay all the rest of the work packages, and if needed, partially. And I think I have some concrete data on what has happened so far in Horizon Europe and Horizon 2020. We've been using the system now since quite a few years, since 2018. And I think this should hopefully be a very reassuring message, because in all the 1,300 lump sum grants that we have completed so far, and we had a couple of thousand, 3,000 work packages or so far, we typically have on average paid basically the full lump sum. In detail, at final payment, we have on average paid 98% of the amounts declared. And I think that includes, that's not on the slide, that includes 96% of lump sum projects that have actually received 100% of the lump sum. So basically, almost all lump sum projects are paid in full the amount that is in the grant agreement. There's a couple of percent where our beneficiaries declare less. I mentioned this possibility, and that was also accepted. And we only have 2% of the cases that we could call contentious, where the beneficiaries declare something where we then actively reject part of that declared amount. In other words, we pay less than was asked. But on average, 98% of the amount in euro is paid. And also we have these rejections at intermediate payment stage, but there again, it's a relatively low incidence that we reject work packages. Only 2%, 2 in 100 work packages reported at interim stage are rejected, meaning they are delayed to the next reporting periods. To us, this shows that our controls are working, but that we certainly don't overdo it, and that there is really no evidence of an increased financial risk for beneficiaries as compared to our standard grants. In actual fact, the financial situation that we generate in this system is extremely similar to what you would have in actual cost grants, except that you save all the financial management work. If anything, the total amount reimbursed in lump sum grants is very, very slightly higher than in actual cost grants, but here the difference isn't huge. So I think the main saving is you get the same level of funding, if anything slightly more, and you save all the work on financial management. Ex post controls exist in lump sum grants as much as in any other grant. However, we will never have any financial audits. So this is simply impossible, because you have a grant agreement that explicitly excludes and does not oblige you to have financial records or to report on the resources of your project. So that can also not be audited. However, any other aspect that is all of the non-financial obligations, and that in particular, of course, includes the proper implementation of the action, can be reviewed, can be checked, and can be controlled. That goes without saying. It's the same, if you like, as in any other grant. This includes mainly the proper implementation, but all of the other non-financial obligations in the same way, be this IPR obligations, open science dissemination, ethics, integrity, security. There's a number of non-financial obligations in all of our grant agreements, and these apply and can be checked and controlled in the same way in lump sum grants as in any other grant. In particular, what we have now introduced is the new process for ex post controls. We've discussed this in detail with the European Court of Auditors and with central services in the Commission to come up with a process that can still control that indeed our funding works well, and that we have an ex post control that verifies the system is working. This is entirely focusing on the technical aspects of your project. Effectively, it's a more in-depth version of the project reviews that we do already routinely for all of our grants during the project duration. So this is a kind of review that takes place after the payment has taken place. It is using external experts, the same technical experts that we would use otherwise, or for evaluation of our projects. It'll focus on the contribution and the work of one single participant. So in that sense, it is analogous to the ex post financial audits that happen in actual cost grants. Procedurally, what we do here is that we ask our reviewees to submit the supporting documents that support and show that the work has been done as in the grant agreement and as reported in your technical reports. What we focus then on is, does this documentation really show that the grant was executed in the way you have reported to us? In other words, do you have the evidence to show that what you said, what you reported is true? You don't need to actually submit to us all and every last documentation that you have gathered and have kept on file to show that the grant is properly implemented, but only a subset, only a set of documents that reasonably show this work was done. We can, if that desk review isn't really conclusive, we can include interviews with the staff that executed this project, and if necessary also do on-site visits. Again, that's pretty much analogous to what happens in ex post financial audits. This option isn't always executed, but it is something that we will do in case the first step isn't conclusive. So for each work package that was in scope of the review, we will come up with a percentage of completion and compare this completion percentage with the percentage that was accepted and paid. And if there's a difference, the difference will be recovered. On record keeping, I think that comes out of what I said before. What you need to keep is any kind of documentation that shows proper implementation, and that is the same as for all of our grants. So there is no new documentation, no additional documentation that you have to keep for lump sum grants that you wouldn't also have to keep for any other grant. So it's the technical documents, it's the publications, it's maybe lab books, it's whatever is documentation in your field of research and innovation according to the state of art, according to the accepted practices in this area. You keep the documentation showing that the work was done, and that is a central and key obligation in all of our grants. In lump sum grants now, if you are subject to one of those ex post technical reviews, this documentation is what you have to provide. What you don't need in lump sum grants is any kind of financial documents, timesheets in particular, or any documentation showing the use of resources. We go even one step further. In our ex post technical reviews, we are not accepting financial documents and we are not accepting timesheets as evidence that the project was properly done. This is really a different principle here for the lump sum grants, we really focus on the technical implementation only, and we do not rely on your financial documentation in case you have it, in case you decided to keep it, because of course we don't, let's say, forbid you. We don't, what you do with the financial management remains entirely the decision of the organization. You may or may not keep timesheets, but you do not have to have them for the lump sum grants. So this is entirely up to the organization. Maybe with the one caveat that whatever is your national law or your local practice or the procedures established in your organization, again, this is of course what you will have to follow. This is a part and aside and outside the grant agreement that you sign with the European Commission. We have here a collection of the resources that you can find on the Funding and Tenders portal, a dedicated page with a lot of information, both for newcomers to lump sum funding and for the more advanced, the detailed guidance, as well as sort of how you start. I would in particular point out the videos, which are a couple of 5-minute videos, quite useful in case you are using lump sums for the first time to tell you what to do and what to watch out for. There is also our research inquiry service. You have here the link, and you have also a QR code to access that resource. Any and all research questions related to Horizon Europe can be submitted there, and you will hopefully get practical answers in case you are submitting a proposal or you're having a problem in managing your lump sum grant. So that is a resource that is valid for all of our grants, but including, of course, for lump sum funding. And with that, I'm at the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. We are now going over, I'm now handing over to Andreia for our section to interview and get the feedback from our experienced lump sum beneficiaries. Thank you.
Thank you, Ulrich, and good morning, everyone. Indeed, we will have now the panel discussion, and I'm happy to welcome our 3 speakers who are connected online, who come from 3 different organizations and who have experience with lump sum funding and can share some best practices, some lessons learned with all of us. And I would like to welcome Athanasios Hadzitakis, who is a researcher at the Center for Materials Science and Nanotechnology Chemistry from the University of Oslo in Norway. And he's coordinating the lump sum project REFINE under a topic in Cluster 5 in Pillar 2, which is focused on efficient and circular artificial photosynthesis. And the consortium of their project is composed of 11 partners, with a budget of approximately 4 million euros for a period of 4 years. And their project started in November 2023 and went through its first reporting period. Then I would also like to welcome Rieke Wönig, who is program coordinator at Democracy Reporting International, an independent non-profit organization based in Germany. And she's coordinating the lump sum project Nets for Them under a topic in Cluster 2, so again in Pillar 2, which is focused on network for innovative solutions for the future of democracy. And their consortium is composed of 10 participants with a budget of approximately 3 million euros. And the project started in July 2023 and went through the first reporting period. And last but not least, I would like to welcome Lorenzo Calabri, who is project manager at ArtAir, Attractiveness Research Territory, which is an Italian organization that aims to strengthen the regional innovation ecosystem in Emilia-Romagna. And he coordinated the lump sum project Ad Astra under a topic in the European Innovation Ecosystem Program part. And his project aimed to build a connected, competitive and interregional innovation ecosystem in the aerospace sector by strengthening the collaboration, the knowledge, the technology transfer among 5 participants that came from 5 European regions. So from Emilia-Romagna and Apulia in Italy, from Occitanie in France, South Holland in the Netherlands, and Madrid in Spain. And their project ended in August 2024, and the budget was around half million euros. So now with this short introduction, I think we can already go to some specific questions. And I would also like to remind the audience online that if you have some questions that you would like to address to our speakers, please use Slido or upvote some questions that that are already there, and we will allocate these questions later on when we have the Q&A session. So now I would like to start with you, Athanasios. So my first question is, compared to other proposals that you may have submitted, what kind of differences did you notice in proposal writing? What would you advise someone considering applying to a topic using lump sum funding?
Thank you very much, Andrea, also for the introduction, and thank you also to Ulrich for giving us a very nice overview of lump sum. And from my experience, as mentioned, differences are not that big. You always have a template, especially for writing the proposal. There is a template that one has to follow, and it has the expected structure of excellence, impact, implementation, and then is the budget. So for the lump sum, and as very nicely explained, the difference is that there is a little bit more work now involved into the preparing that budget before it is submitted into that Excel file, indeed. And the budget, it has this more of a resort, more of a resolution, so that each beneficiary, each project partner has to allocate resources into the work packages that are involved. And then in each work package, one has also to do some division of these costs compared to different categories. So for example, there are the personnel that they can also be break down into like a junior or senior or technical, admin, and other. One has to also put in each work package if there is travel involved, consumables, etc. So there is a little bit more from my experience. It looked that it's a little bit more work during the submission process, but I think the aim is then while the project is running, it is much easier because everything is predefined and is much easier in terms of the economy part. And I can say also for the economy part, for example, for the refined project, we indeed had to do some correction in the budget. Was actually reduced because the reviewers had thought that we had overestimated some efforts into some specific work package. We received their feedback, and then we reduced also that funding, so that it happened. Yet, as it was also mentioned, the project was financed, so it was not an aspect that it would have rejected the project. Yeah, that is mainly the experience from my side. And of course, main advice is that one has to look at this economy part and the breakdown of all these categories for each partner per work package quite carefully, and also give this reasonable estimate. So, for example, I can also mention that the order of reduction in one work package was also in the range of the 50%, if I remember correctly. So the reviewers thought that we have overestimated by 50% efforts in a specific work package.
Thank you. And just a follow-up question. And do you consider that the internal management of your grant is different compared to other projects that you might have been involved in?
Yeah, so it's different in the sense that after the project is set and it started and it got its pre-financing, then it is running more smoothly, and it is internally now that we deal with the budget and one has a little bit more freedom of how things are being conducted and being worked out in each of the work packages per partner, per organization. So overall impression is that the economic part has become much simpler, and it falls down indeed to then the specifics of each organization. So, for example, for the time sheets in the University of Oslo, we are not using them, but other partners in the consortium, of course, they don't have the experience yet. They have not have a completed yet lump sum project, so they are thinking that these might still be useful. They are doing it, but also, as mentioned, it could be that it is part of a state practices. But from our case, for example, we are not doing that, and it seems also that it is simpler to operate.
Okay, thank you, Athanasios. Now I'm also curious to know about your experience, Rieke. So my first question is, what was your approach in selecting the partners in your consortium? Did your lump sum grant require a different consortium agreement than in other grants?
Yes, thank you for this question and also for the presentation beforehand. So in terms of selecting partners, for us, the first step is always to check the eligibility criteria of the call. Maybe seems a little bit basic, but it's important not to forget that. And then also to verify the track record of each potential partner. So do they have a strong track record in implementing successfully similar projects in high quality? And then the second step for us is always to assess based on the expectations and requirements of the call that we are applying to, what are the kinds of profiles, the kind of know-how, technical expertise that is needed in the consortium to fulfill those or even go beyond those, depending on what you are planning. And for us, in our experience, we always needed different partners with complementary profiles that all have a very distinct function within the consortium and in some create a, let's say, convincing effective package. So for example, for Netz for Dem, there is a strong research component in the project. There's a strong capacity building component in the project. And we also needed partners with strong pre-established relationships to certain target audiences. And so each partner will correspond to one or several of these components. Regarding the consortium agreement, we generally followed the standard consortium agreement for which a template is provided by the European Commission. I think the only thing where we adapted it a little bit, also compared to the grant agreement, is that we lowered a little bit the pre-financing to partners in the first iteration of the project as a measure of precaution, basically because it's a rather large consortium. Some of the partners we did not have previously working relationships with. But otherwise we really followed the template and didn't need to implement any particular provisions for the Netz for Dem project.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is, did your lump sum project require any technical amendments? And if so, what was the main reason, and did it work as expected?
So for Netz for Dem, we did not require any special amendment apart from the fact that we turned at some point as a conduit partner to a full beneficiary. But that was a rather, I would say, unique case that is not necessarily applicable to most other projects. But otherwise, in terms of the implementation or work packages, we did not make any changes during the implementation.
And just a follow-up questions for your first reporting period. How was the experience with declaring work packages? how did it go?
For the reporting, you say?
Yes.
Yeah, that was a good experience. We had one interim report so far, and the process worked very smoothly. We provided the report, and all work packages were accepted. There were only a few follow-up questions, but for us it was a rather straightforward and collaborative process with the Commission.
Okay, thank you very much, Rieke. And I will turn now to Lorenzo with the last set of questions. Since your lump sum grant ended, what is also your experience with declaring the completion of work packages, especially at the final reporting period?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question and for the invitation. Yes, I'm really happy to be here because we've had a very good experience with this project and with the lump sum model, I would say. Yeah, as you mentioned, the project ended 2 years ago, and started 4 years ago. So maybe sometimes it's passed, but anyway, I remember as a very good experience. And maybe just as a preamble, then I will go to the question, but it's useful, I think. Maybe this project is a bit different from the other two colleagues here in the call, because yeah, it was a very a small one, only $500,000 of budget and only 5 partners involved, and this has been one of the major, I think, benefit in the management of the project, and also, of course, in the final reporting phase. And another preamble is that this project is funded under the call European Innovation Ecosystem Connect 01 of 2021. So it was the first of a kind, let's say, in the European Innovation Ecosystem. So was brand new for us, in some case quite new also for European Commission. So we have many things to understand, in particular for us at least, also in the lump sum model, that I mean, we found, of course, it's the approach is basically binary. So you get funded if your work package is completed, and you don't get funded if I mean, there is no partial contribution if you don't close a work package. So this is something not easy to approach, in particular in that period. I mean, as a first approach for us. So in general, this is very important, as has been said before, to take this into account in the preparatory phase, in writing the proposal. So an important thing to consider in the proposal phase, starting from the proposal phase, is the partnership, because the secret, let's say, I mean, I can say it after the end of the project, the secret of our project, in my opinion, was the partnership itself, basically. Indeed, all the 5 partners, but as I said, maybe a consortium of 5 partners is easier to manage, but all the 5 partners were, I mean, I have to say, have a lot of commitment in the project, and can work very well together with a lot of contribution among the partners. And this is possible, I would say, also because in this specific kind of project that is connecting regional ecosystems, the 5 projects were pretty much on the same level. Okay, we were the coordinator, but more, coordinating the work. But each partner has the same, let's say, basically the same task that needs to report in their territory, their region. So being on the same level and so sharing basically the same target was very helpful. So we had a lot of exchange of information, of course, of best practices, and every partner works in the same direction and also in the same work packages. And this reflects, of course, also in the final reporting period, in particular in relation to the main deliverable of the project. It was also the last deliverable, that was a joint action plan that is because I have to say that the project was not a technical one. It was more connected to the regional ecosystem, so developing the regional ecosystem in a domain that is the aerospace domain that is quite niche, but is growing a lot. So all these things, let's say, come together for the growing and for the development of the project. So the final report, that was a joint action plan, was of great interest for all the 5 partners in order to bring it in their territories and to talk with the regions, to develop this joint action plan, to provide activities to make the aerospace sector growing in each territory. And for this reason, we are very harmonic, I would say, in developing this joint action plan, coming, of course, from all the previous activities within the project. And the development was really smooth and in time by the end of the project. Then, of course, having done these technical activities was, honestly, it was quite easy in drafting and preparing the final reporting, let's say, at the end of the project, because it was, as we mentioned, the important thing is that the financial and administrative burden is shift to a more technical activities. So this is very relevant and can help us in having a final phase of the project quite smooth in preparing the final reporting. One last thing I would like to say is that we worked a lot, in particular at the end of the project, with the project officer, maybe because it was the first call on EIE Connect, I don't know. But anyway, we have a lot of interaction with the project, positive interaction with the project officer, and this helped a lot in closing in time the project and preparing the final reporting. Without too much stress, I would say, and without mistakes or errors. So I would recommend, of course, depend on people, depend on officers, but I would recommend to have a good, let's say, exchange of information with the project officer.
Okay, thank you very much, Lorenzo. And just I would like to clarify one thing that was also presented by Ulrich. So about the completion of work packages. So at the end of the project, there is also the possibility to declare partially completed work packages and get a partial payment in. Exactly. Yeah. So it's not binary, indeed.
No, you're right. Yeah, that's true. But maybe just thinking about it before, while writing the proposal, it's a bit. But you're right. Yeah, at the end, it's doable. Yeah.
Indeed. And so thank you so much. My second question for you was already answered. It was about what would you advise, and you already mentioned what would you advise other lump sum coordinators, and you already mentioned a good communication between the consortium with the project officers, and I think yes, indeed, this is very important. So now I think we can close the panel discussion here, and I would like to thank again all 3 of you for your availability to take part in the webinar and to share your experience with us. And just to remind you again that we will have a Q&A session afterwards. So please put your question in Slido or upvote the ones that you are interested in, because we will answer them based on the most popular ones. And now we will have also a 5 minutes break just to prepare for that and to make a pause, and we will come back with the Q&A session. Thank you.
So welcome back to our lump sum webinar. We are now starting the Q&A session. We have already quite a number of questions received. and we go through them as announced from the top. We also have our three guests with us, I hope still with us, who can help us answer these questions. And in fact, for the very first question, I would directly ask Athanasios from Oslo, because, well, I imagine from the friends I have in Norway, I know that Norway is a high cost, high salary country. So how did this work for you? Did you have any problems putting in the necessary personnel costs in your lump sum project?
Yes, thank you. It's a very good question indeed. And it also, these rates vary between also the public and the private sector. So if it is, for example, some research institute and the University of Oslo. So we were also concerned at some point that one could see also big variations in amounts of PMs per month and the budget allocated. So of course things they are how they are. So then it falls down how one can plan the work to be done with such resources. But indeed that was a concern also from our side and also for other projects that we have submitted, not received, but that was a good point. So it falls down to, of course, these rates are known, as you mentioned also, and then it falls down to the work to be done to be reasonable according to those rates and PMs that are suggested.
Yeah, but maybe concretely, did you actually submit in your proposal, if you remember, did you get any recommendations or a request to reduce these rates or change your lump sum budget? First of all, was your lump sum budget changed at all in the evaluation process, or did it go through, as is the case for the majority of the projects, without changes?
Yes, as I mentioned, the budget was actually needed a correction, and the correction was not for a Norwegian partner, because there are three, but the reviewers thought for another partner. They thought that in that specific work package, and I would like also to explain this better, as I mentioned, that the budget was reduced actually by 50%, but not for the whole work package, but the package, but for the work of the specific partner for the specific work package. And it was not from Norway, the rates there and the efforts, they were seen appropriate.
Okay, so did you provide any specific justification for these Norwegian rates? Because I imagine you have put in rates, that were high. So did you have to have any specific justification, or how? No, you just basically entered. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So
exactly. No, there was no some specific specification for the rates of any of the Norwegian partner, in fact.
Okay, thanks very much. I mean, I see from the questions that follow that we come to the question of personnel costs also in other questions, and maybe we can also hear the other guests on that. But let's maybe continue with the next questions. I think I would like to bracket the next two questions. That is, now the order has changed, but sort of there were other questions on the dashboard. Now, generally speaking, I don't think we should discuss the dashboard here in the terms of are these data outdated or how are they constructed. I certainly disagree with a statement that they are outdated. Here, I would really encourage you to go to your national contact point with whom we are discussing this in detail and have been discussing this since the beginning of the dashboard. If you believe that there are mistakes in how it is constructed, you should really channel this through the national contact point. What I can say is what you find in the dashboard is really the data of the personnel costs that are funding actual cost grants. And currently we are still in a situation where the big majority of ongoing grants are using actual costs. So what you see, the dashboard is really the amounts that are in those signed actual cost grants. So I would certainly disagree that they are particularly outdated, because we limit this to, I think, grants signed since 23 or now even 22 is still, the 22 data are still in there. Okay, so we go back 3 years, but it's not that we go back to Horizon 2020 or something like that. And of course, our experts are aware that this is using historic data. But when I say historic, it's not the last decade or something. Andrea, please.
And maybe just to add here that we update the data quite regularly. So the last update was done at the beginning of this month. So actually, sorry, of May. We are now in June. So we update it twice a year to take into account also the most recent grants that are signed.
Yeah. And let me maybe add as a bit of context. In fact, the Commission, we are very much under control by our auditors. Now, if anything, our auditors have exactly the opposite concern. They believe that our lump sum model leads to overpayment of personnel costs. In other words, they believe the Commission is far too generous with personnel costs in lump sum grants and that we should be stricter. Now, when you sort of tell me especially that high cost countries have a disadvantage here, or that generally speaking it is difficult to include appropriate personnel costs, then that is sort of the complete opposite position, and I find myself somewhere in the middle. What we in fact see is there is absolutely no statistically significant difference between the level of personnel costs in actual cost and lump sum grants. We have quite good data showing that. Now, that may not help you in your individual case, but overall, the lump sum funding system is quite well monitored and studied, and we don't see this difference, and we are under significant pressure to show that we are not overly generous. Now, when it comes to high cost countries, of course, again, I recall I really don't see that point, because when we compare your proposed costs, we of course only use the data from your country and your organization type. So in other words, we are not comparing the costs in Sweden and in Slovenia. So that goes without saying. Belgian universities are only compared with other Belgian universities. And that principle, of course, is true for all lower and all higher income countries. We also sometimes hear about problems within consortia, that consortia find it difficult to agree on the distribution of the budget. I'm sure that may be the case, and I'm sure this is the case or can be the case in all grants and all proposal writing. But here, indeed, the Commission cannot really take sides, and we cannot really come into that debate. That really is a task of the consortium to agree amongst themselves. So I think that's, in case we get more questions on personnel costs, bear this in mind. We have to have a balanced approach. We cannot do this in an uncontrolled way. Of course, you have always the possibility to ask for costs above the 80th percentile. We have many cases of that happening. If this is explained and justified, usually I see no reason why this should not be accepted. During grant preparation, you have another chance to convince the granting authority that, in fact, your high personnel costs are absolutely needed and justified. But finally, of course, it is the granting authority that takes a decision and then signs a lump sum grant with you, where indeed, in some cases, but I think I showed also, no, not in this presentation, but we have very good data, again, to show the frequency with which we make these cuts is quite low, and also the extent of these cuts are generally quite low. So I have invited many times the national contact points, but also this audience here, to share concrete cases where you believe that perfectly well justified personnel costs have been rejected and where this rejection has been upheld. So again, I invite all of you to share with us cases where you really have, where you can really show personnel costs were well justified, and against this justification, they were cut. So in other words, where you believe it's a procedural mistake and your personal cost really should have been accepted. To be honest, until this day, we haven't had such a case yet. Nobody has actually come up and shared a concrete case, while the allegations that this is happening, I keep hearing now and then, but well, I'm still waiting for the first concrete case to materialize on my desk. So let's maybe continue with that to the next question.
So I can take this one. Can I assume that once granted budget flexibility is in principle unlimited, so in case of problems, the consortium can agree on changes, for example, transfers between partners? Could we use the consortium agreement to cover such principle? So in short, the answer is yes. So you have budget flexibility in lump sum grants. You don't need to do an amendment if you need to do some changes to the budget between partners or between work packages. And of course, you can also have something on this in the consortium agreement. So it's up to you. And as said before also by Ulrich in his presentation, if you need to have those changes also reflected in Annex 2 of the grant agreement, so in the financial annex, for this you would need an amendment.
Yeah.
But other than that, yeah.
Maybe I add that we, the Commission, we will always use the latest version of the grant agreement to calculate your payments, or in case of problems, or in case you have a termination, a bankruptcy, whatever happens in administrative terms there, we will use the latest version of the grant agreement. But that, of course, also means in case you just carry out the project and you complete the work packages, well, we will pay according to this grant agreement, the work packages and ultimately the total lump sum. So if that works with you, there is absolutely no need for you to amend the grant. You can cover all these cases in your consortium agreement. So it's more a question of what happens in case there are serious problems like, let's say, bankruptcy could be one situation or other terminations or partners not defaulting partners in general. But otherwise, you carry out the project, you get the lump sum, all the rest you can decide within the consortium. Maybe let's go to the next question. Using this new online form, is there a way that the coordinator can limit access? In other words, is there a specific control for the coordinator? I'm not sure there is, and I'm not sure how easy this would be, and if all of the consortia really would want that. We can investigate typically access to different parts of the proposal. There is access management in place. So who has access to which parts of your proposal and later access to which parts of the grant management. That depends on the rights that ultimately the coordinator and the leaders in each participating organization give to the various members. I am not sure how we have done this. Probably indeed intentionally we have given access to each organization to fill in their budget in order also not to overburden the coordinator who would otherwise have to do all this work by themselves. But I mean, I see the point that it might be interesting for the coordinator to have a final say. We will keep, it's well noted. I'll investigate how what we have and if there is a possibility there. But also noting that these kind of requests, typically not all consortia have the same view and the same approach. So is a question of what is the best here for the majority. Next question.
Yes, so how the audit is performed for lump sums? Do we actually need then all the detailed information with invoices, timesheets, etc.? So again, for lump sums, the ex post controls are in the form of ex post technical reviews. So it is focused on the proper implementation of the work as described in the grant agreement. So it's not focused on financial on financial aspects. So you don't need to present invoices or timesheets and so on. And these ex post technical reviews, so we look more in depth at how the work was performed, if it was implemented as described. And regarding the supporting documents, these are supporting documents that prove that the work has been done. We have some examples also in the guidance, for example, technical documentation, lab books, publications, and so on. So you don't need to also submit again the reporting, the technical report, because this we already have access. So you just need to focus on the supporting additional documents.
Yeah. So in short, there is no audit, in particular no financial audit. What we do is a technical review, and that requires the technical documentation. So no invoices, no timesheets, no salary slips, no employment contracts, basically no financial documentation, no documentation of your resources. We're not interested in that in a lump sum situation. Okay. For the rest, I think we've covered it also in the presentation. Let's go to the next question, which is again on the salaries. I think that we have covered. So let's go to the next question. Yes, it's true that you provide the best estimate in your budget. Well, if the experts, I think there's also, well, if the experts find that your estimation is unconvincing, they can recommend a change. Maybe there's this one principle that we will never increase the amount. So the consortium makes a proposal and they ask for a certain maximum grant amount. We will never, as a result of the evaluation, say, in fact, you need more. You ask for so much, and we will not come to the conclusion that you should have more than that. We can absolutely come to the conclusion that you should get less than what you asked, but we will never increase the amount. But within that limit, of course, the experts can also recommend to change the amount among beneficiaries or among work packages. And maybe we can quickly go to our guest speakers. Apart from this project coordinated in Oslo, did anybody of you have budget changes or shifts in the budget, or was the budget just accepted as proposed? We already heard from Oslo there was a change in one of the work packages, but for a different partner, which actually also illustrates that the recommendations that we get from our experts can be very precise. Like they really only concern one particular partner or one work package, or in fact just one particular cost estimation. Did anybody else have have such a case where a change was made, or in the other two projects, or did these budgets go through unchanged?
Yeah, I don't know if I can comment, but
please.
Yeah, in our case, there was no change at all. Yeah, everything was confirmed as it was in the proposal. No change. So, and I can also confirm that in the final audit, the question before, there was no request for anything about finance. Let's say everything was on the technical development of the project. Yeah.
I mean, I imagine you didn't have a technical review. What you here refer to as final audit is probably the final project review at the end of the project, which every project has.
Exactly.
That is not what we call the ex post review. That is sort of the standard check of the project before the project is closed. That is not to be. These are two different things, and every project will have that. And indeed, it's a good. Thank you for pointing out. We do not ask for financial documentation in the ex post review, but we also don't ask for financial documentation ex ante, what we call ex ante. In other words, the regular, normal project monitoring while the project is ongoing or at the end of the project. Of course, there is a check before we make a final payment. Again, all these checks and reviews, they do not involve financial documentation, neither while the project is ongoing nor after the end of the project. I'm not sure if there's no. It probably sounds like we didn't have any other interesting changes in budgets to report. So let's maybe go to the next question.
Yeah. So how detailed should a work package description be to clearly judge it as completed and therefore payable? How strict proposals should be with work package acceptance criteria? So to describe the work packages, you should keep in mind that you need to focus on the activities, on the tasks of each partner that is involved in the work package. Also, the proposal template, the standard proposal template for Horizon Europe grants has some more indications on how to describe the work packages. I think we had an update in 2024, if I'm not mistaken, just to provide more details on how the work packages need to be described. So please also have a look at that. And about the acceptance of work packages, as Ulrich mentioned, so the general principle is that all activities should be completed in order to be accepted as such, but also essential tasks can be completed, so we can consider the work package as completed. Or if you do some equivalent tasks, this can also be accepted, and also if you have some deviations, you need to justify them in the periodic report.
Look, in this proposal template, you get some guidance, and that guidance applies to all of our grants. Again, it's not lump sum specific, but it's true that we probably updated it and made it a bit more clear in view of lump sum grants, but it applies everywhere, where we tell you sort of a little bit on what the level of detail is that we would like to see in your work package description, breaking work packages down by tasks, telling us who is doing what and how much resources you expect to be needed for each of these tasks or parts of work packages. So look at that. And maybe last thing to add is we have no intention, and I don't think this happened, to be more strict with your work package acceptance and acceptance of projects as properly implemented than in any other grants. So that was certainly something that many people were afraid, that we were going to say, well, now it's a lump sum. Either you do everything exactly to the I dot as is described in the grant agreement, or we're not going to pay. And that is exactly not what we are doing. You know that also in all other grants, you have the obligation to do the work and to do all the work, of course. It would be very strange if that obligation didn't exist, and if in other grants we only said, well, it's enough to spend money and we don't care if you carry out the project. That is certainly not the case. All projects have the obligation to be properly implemented, meaning that you have to do the work that is described in the grant agreement. And indeed, the lump sum is different in that we make payment dependent, or that we link the payment event to the check of this having taken place. But all projects have the obligation, and we are not applying stricter standards as such. Our aim is always to equally treat projects in this regard, so that projects should have sanctions or financial consequences only in similar situations, when there is something missing, when there is a clear sign of lack of implementing this project properly. Next question. Now that's again a question on the budget table. Well, we are introducing this online for many different reasons, because the Excel template has caused numerous problems in terms of, first of all, in terms of compatibility. In order to use this template, you need a rather new version of Excel, of Microsoft Excel. It's sort of, with all the macros it uses, it will not work with any open source software for tabulation and calculation software. You really need MS Excel, a relatively new version that also isn't really perfectly in line with Europe's digital strategy, where we would like to be more independent from single software producers. But beyond that, the Excel template, of course, created problems because you had entry of information in part A of the proposal and you had entry of information in the Excel. In many cases, this information was not consistent. And whenever we have inconsistent information about your budget, even though in part A there's only a very, very high level summary of this Excel, but that is what you have to enter. If we get different information, it has to be corrected. That causes a lot of work on your side and on the side of the agencies handling these proposals. There were various cases when proposals had to be excluded because of mistakes in the Excel. For example, if they have modified the template, which maybe can even happen accidentally, but maybe also intentionally. So proposals had to be excluded for that reason. All of that cannot happen if it's integrated and you only have one part A, where automatically with the number of work packages and the number of participants that you define, you get the tables that are necessary. Now, different people seem to have different views on how easy it is to complete an Excel table and spreadsheet or an online web form. The information that is collected is essentially the same. Yeah, this is certainly the direction of travel also for other templates that currently still use Word or Excel. Over time, we have an intention to reduce them. I'm not saying that they will all disappear or anytime soon, but the direction of travel is certainly in this direction, to rather try and bring this online and become independent from separate templates, where also the content obviously cannot be controlled related to what we have as structured information. But I understand that indeed, if you have had the practice of working with the Excel, this is a change. And as I said, we are still working in optimizing that online system. There are further developments to be expected. Okay. Next question. I think, yeah, we can also not use our guests here because none of them have used this new online table. So there is no experience there.
So for the next question, if we split the work packages, the number of overall work packages may triple, over a dozen, maybe more, as opposed to 6-7 usually recommended. Won't the excessive number of work packages look bad for evaluators? So I have to say that no. So the answer is no, in the sense that experts, evaluators are briefed before doing the evaluation on the lump sum specificities, and one of these aspects is related to the work plan, to the design of the work packages, and that there is the possibility to split them along the reporting periods. So they are instructed about that as well. But I think it's very important to keep in mind that when you do so when you split those work packages, please make sure that the resulting work package is still a major subdivision of the work plan. So we don't want to see a single activity or a single task to be a work package in itself. So still the work plan as such needs to make sense.
Well, I would like to come back to what I said in my presentation. Think very carefully if you would really want to split every last work package. If you would now, in your situation, you may have 3 reporting periods. So in a way, the situation that you describe here is the maximum splitting that you can do. And that would really be sort of course, Andreia is right, as such, that should not in itself disadvantage your proposal. But I would really encourage you to check if that's really necessary and if that's really helpful, because really the motivation to split should be your cash flow. Do you really, in your project, believe that it's impossible to manage the cash flow without making all these splits? And if the answer is yes, well, then you have to go for it. But indeed, make sure that the resulting work packages make sense as work packages, because if that is not anymore the case, yes, then you may indeed have evaluators criticizing this. And here I would also really like to ask our guest speakers, how much use did you make of this possibility? Because that is nothing new. We have that principle since many years in the lump sum system. You can split work packages. did you use that and to what extent?
Maybe I can start. So for Netz for Dem, we did make use of this possibility for 2 work packages. And for these 2 work packages, the reason was that one of them had a very high budget share, and the other one was for our capacity building programs, where we had a lot of purchase costs that would go to external mentors for the capacity building programs. And so for these 2 work packages, it really made sense for us in terms of the cash flow to split them. But otherwise, we did not do it for other work packages. And also the fact that due to that, we had a higher number of work packages, that was no problem for the evaluation of the proposal.
And how many work packages did you have in total?
In the end, we had 9 work packages.
Okay. Yeah, so that's sort of indeed also what I see in many lump sum projects. There is, let's say, a moderate increase compared with standard grants, but that the number of work packages really triples is, let's say, more the exception. So you would be very much at the upper end with this approach. But let's maybe hear from the others.
Yes, I can also add here that in the refined project, we have maybe the other end, like 20 work packages, because we split exactly because of this cash flow, but there are also in the consortium companies and SMEs involved, and that was the crucial aspect, let's say, so that there is this cash flow taken into account. That was deemed not problematic at all. So the project is running with 20 work packages. Is tiring for the coordinator, but it is manageable, and it's not a minor task. So it made also sense to us. So it is possible if it is strictly necessary.
Thanks.
It worked for us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, just
Please.
yeah, maybe I can just comment very quickly because in our case was different. We didn't use we didn't split any work package, but we had 80% pre-funding because it was a 2 years project and only 2 reporting period. So I mean, it was of course not a problem about the cash flow having such a big pre-financing, and so that's the main reason. We just keep 1 work package closing in the first reporting period. It was a technical project, and overall there were 5 work packages. So yeah, it was quite smooth this way. But I can understand, of course, splitting the work package, some of the work packages for this purpose. Yeah.
So very good. We see there is a variety of different approaches possible and was accepted. So I think that answers the question. Next question. Should I take it?
Yeah.
Go for it.
So do evaluators compare the proposal total average person month costs to the dashboard values, or do they compare each person month category, senior, junior, etc., to the dashboard values? So ideally what we also say on the landing page of the dashboard is that experts need to look at the costs, the personal costs of every staff category, because this is important. I think it's common sense. If you have senior staff, they will have higher costs per month, and of course if you have junior, they will have less. So they need to take that into account when they assess the budget. Also, they need to take into account the number of person months, so the resources overall that will be allocated to that work package for that beneficiary, and so on. So
yeah, so we could say it's the latter. We really the dashboard can only provide the average of the total, because we have no other data from the grants that we can put in a statistically meaningful way. So the dashboard necessarily only provides the cost of funded person months on average. And then as Andreia just said, we inform, of course, we point out to the experts that compared to this average values that you have in the dashboard, you can expect that senior staff is quite high in relation to this, and junior or technical staff is lower in comparison to this average, because the average that we provide encompasses all different staff categories, because we have no way of resolving that. Next question. That's again a question on what happens in the ex post technical reviews. So yes, I can confirm timesheets, invoices, etc. All the financial documentation is not needed and not even accepted. So what would be accepted? So I think that seems to be also really an important question, because I think I've heard the same question now at least once, and we've already covered it, I think, in the presentation. Now, what you have to have is the technical documentation to demonstrate proper implementation of your project. An obligation that you have in every grant agreement, an obligation that is part of the ALEA Code of Conduct. That's the European Association of Learned Societies that has set up this best practices of Code of Conduct for conducting research and innovation work. So I think there is certainly wide agreement that research and innovation work generally has to be documented. So that's sort of even outside our grant agreement. Our grant agreement refers to this obligation and or refers to this good practice and makes it an obligation of that all our beneficiaries work according to these good practices, and that certainly includes that your research and innovation work is documented. And exactly these documents can of course be different in different subject areas. I could very well imagine that our three guest speakers have different types of documentation, because it does make a difference in which context you operate and what kind of project you do. But I guess you keep some documentation. Maybe we can also now go to our guest speakers again to find out what do you keep in case somebody comes and asks, did you actually carry out the project? That is different from invoices and timesheets. I don't know who, if you would like to, because again, depends obviously on the nature of the things that you do. That would be very different. I mentioned before a clinical study, and you can of course also have a project in the social sciences, or you can have an engineering project, a mathematics project, a language project. All of these different disciplines and areas would probably come up with different documentation of the kind of things they have done. So would anybody like to come in and say what they have?
Yeah, maybe I can start again, try to be brief. Yeah, honestly, in our case, the project, as I said, was not a technical project. It was more about ecosystem interaction, let's say, and having these 5 regions coming together to a final result that was this joint action plan. So how to bring innovation in terms of ecosystem growing in each territory. So to demonstrate this result, of course, we have the joint action plan. We have all the things done along the project that are, of course, there is a lot of deliverables connected to the project, and also all the, let's say, activities in background that was like SWOT analysis of each territory in details. So with information about, in that case was aerospace sector, information about the companies involved, the research centers. I mean, but that's material that is actually also reported in the project, but it's a result of each step along the project.
No, I understand there is quite a lot of coordination in this project you did. And I mean, coordination work, be this meetings among the consortium, discussions with experts, whatever in the end was the inputs you collected to come up with your action plan or to come up with we don't need to enter into the details, but that is of course valid information and valid documentation. These meetings have taken place. Maybe you have meeting minutes. These kind of things would, of course, be absolutely valid documentation to show that the activities took place.
Exactly, and also with public administration, for example, in this specific case. Yeah, but it's right. Yeah.
Not sure if the others. We are already at 12 o'clock, but maybe we have time to, because I think it's a quite interesting question, like what projects keep in terms of documentation. We've also had this question in other webinars and in other discussion rounds. I think it's also due to the fact that in actual cost grants, this kind of documentation, of course, I mentioned already 2 or 3 times, is an obligation to keep, but routinely we do not ask for it. So some consortia may sort of, or some participants may still have to get used to the fact that there is a chance, in case they are selected for an ex post audit, that this documentation is also requested and has to be provided. So not sure if anybody else would like to add.
Yeah, I could also add, as you mentioned, we make sure that we have all, because the project is heavily experimental, but also from natural sciences, but also from social sciences. So data collection, raw data collection, stored securely with all the different levels regarding if they are also sensitive or not, and so on, are securely stored, and there is a distribution within the partners and so on. All these very well established procedures to exactly demonstrate that the work is being performed. And that was also because the project has been through the first periodic report. There was no work package at that time completed, so there was no economic report in that sense, that simple report. So it was heavily technical, and the technical, it has to be really demonstrated in a very good detail at that time, what we have reached, what we haven't, and when to expect to reach our goals. So we really had to be very, very concrete, and this only can be done by only showing, of course, the relevant data. That also, as Lorenzo mentioned, is also part of the deliverables, where the work is there described in a lot of detail.
Thank you. Any other input on that? Not really. Okay. I mean, maybe one last word on the deliverables. Again, for us, deliverables are, of course, reports of your activity or of outcomes of the project, and they are sort of they are not the same as the reporting, the supporting documentation. In the end, you report maybe in quite some detail in deliverable reports what has happened and what has come out of this project. And then our experts, when they do this review, they would like to see, again, supporting documentation that what you have written in your deliverable report is actually borne out by facts. That is that's sort of but indeed the level of detail that you have in these deliverable reports and in your technical reports, that is perfectly enough. You certainly don't have to have more detail than that, but the documentation that you submit should reasonably show that indeed what you have reported, including in the deliverable reports, was true, was borne out by facts, actually happened, and is indeed is real. That is in the end what comes in case you are subject to an ex post technical review. Now, maybe we should say, of course, this is a sampling process. There will only be a relatively, a rather small share of lump sum projects will ever go through this ex post review process. That is by far not every project will be selected. That is a statistical sampling process to to have a global view and get an idea to what extent lump sum funding is working. It's the same as for financial audits in actual cost grants. By far, not every project and every beneficiary is subject to a financial audit. So that's just to clarify, it's not that everybody will have this. Okay, with that, I'm afraid we cannot go through all the other questions. We'll certainly have a look at that and see in case there are questions that we believe haven't been covered in our guidance and in the lump sum documentation available online. We'll go through and see if anything else is new, is not covered there. Again, if you have other questions, problems with submission of your proposal or management of your grant, send a question to the Research Inquiry Service. They are there to help, or go to this page on the Funding and Tenders portal, the lump sum page, and see if you can use the resources there. With that, thanks very much for your attention. Thanks very much to our 3 guest speakers. All the best also to your projects and future endeavors. And thanks very much for being with us today. With this, I think I can close the webinar for today. Goodbye.
Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.